Hello, young people of the internet. My name is Rachel, and I'm with the Bill of Rights Institute, and I'm here with a couple of my colleagues, Gary and Kirk.
Hi, everybody.
So it's been a couple of weeks since things were normal, and the Bill of Rights Institute wanted to still talk to the young people that we talk to through our teachers, and we wanted to invite you into conversation with us about the things that get us excited right now. So we, as people who love history and love thinking about current events, we've been paying attention to a lot of things happening in the news, as you have. We've been following a lot of things on social media, as you have. And we've decided we want to talk with you about those things that are really inspiring and interesting to us as part of the big community that is on the internet right now. So first, I wanted to talk to my friend Kirk. So Kirk is Director of Content here at the Bill of Rights Institute. And he has been thinking a lot about what it means to comfort people right now. So Kirk, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were thinking?
Yeah, so I was thinking about crises. So history is where I live, and every time something like this happens, I immediately start trying to figure out what else has happened that's been similar, and how is it similar, or how is it dissimilar? And one of the things that's always interesting to see in these situations is how it is our leaders react, and how it is that they work to try and get the country understanding what's going on and comforting them when there's a lot of uncertainty.
So we've had a lot of different leaders kind of putting themselves in front of the population in different ways, right? So you have Governor Cuomo of New York, or the California legislators, or the national senators, or the president, all trying to communicate in all these different ways.
And also, you know, leaders of classrooms. More and more classes are starting to have their classes come back online. And I know I would look to a teacher as my leader.
And Gary and I were actually classroom teachers for a long time. So we are thinking about all of the teachers and all the students out there who are struggling to figure out what leadership means right now. How are you a leader, both for your class and for your friends, but also in your community?
Yeah, so in 1933, we were in the midst of the Great Depression, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, had just been elected, and he was struggling with all these kinds of things too. There was a lot of uncertainty. There had been a run on the banks, which means that people had gone all at the same time to try to get their money out, much like there's a run on toilet paper right now.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and
there's actually really fascinating history about the history of
that.
Toilet paper runs we might get to.
So he was looking for a way to talk to the people of the United States to let them know what was going on. And back in the 1930s, they didn't have the internet like we're coming to you now, but what they did have was radio. So FDR decided that he would get on the radio and address directly the American people and let them know what was going on. And he did this through a series of what are called fireside chats, because he would come into your home and he would be sitting next to you at your fireside as he talked through the crisis.
Must have been nice to just hear the voice of somebody like that.
Yeah, it is, you know, and he opens it up with this really beautiful, or I guess it's not beautiful, might be the wrong word, but he says, you know, let me find it here. He says, I want to talk to you for a few minutes with the people of the United States about banking. You know, which seems like a very boring kind of an intro. But it's really powerful because it's the leader of the United States wanting to sit down with you, the person who's sitting next to the radio, to talk about banking and what's going on.
I mean, it's what's going on.
Yeah. And at the time, it wasn't as common that people would be so casual with leaders, right? So right now, the president tweets all the time, and you can follow his tweets on Twitter. In the 1930s, you didn't have access to the president in that way, right, Kirk?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was this very suddenly intimate connection with someone you would ordinarily only see in newsreels maybe, or just hear speaking. And so for him to now be in your home speaking directly to you was this really, really powerful moment. And he ends with this really beautiful phrase. He says, "It is your problem no less than it is mine. Together, we cannot fail." Which there, you know, he's very much appealing to that American spirit that the government is only a reflection of ourselves. And the government does what is in our interest, and we maintain its focus on that by voting in elected officials and being involved in our civic communities. And FDR was one of the first to really bring that home through a popular medium like radio.
Absolutely.
It's nice because I'm kind of enjoying us just hearing everybody talking. I miss talking to people, and I could see why that would be really comforting to folks to just be here. I'm forgetting for a second that I'm just here in my home and getting entranced to hearing about this. It's nice.
Yeah,
and you see
absolutely.
You see that a lot happening now. I'm sure you young people on the internet are seeing it everywhere. All your different communities coming together to provide you with resources that are mediated through the internet. Well, radio at the time was the way that was the technology available to bring people together in times of crisis, just like the internet is available today to bring people to crisis through the internet. And I'm sure you've been having lots of experiences where you're looking for escape, right? So you're on Twitch following new people, or you're on TikTok following new people, you're exploring new YouTube channels. Maybe that's how you found us here. But there are lots of ways to think about what it means to be isolated versus part of a community, what it means to be indoors versus out of doors. And Gary's been thinking a lot about what he's missing in the out of doors.
Yeah, it's
Gary,
funny. One of the things that I think is really nice that's happened lately is a lot of museums have opened up or digitized a lot of their collections for people. And I have been thinking about it. I'm not getting outdoors as often as I would like. I'm trying, and I really recommend everybody do that, even if it's just a little bit of time of the day. I'm finding people who have dogs are very fortunate because you have to walk them. But yeah, I was thinking about outside. Can I show you something that I found?
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay. So I was looking through collections. When I was a teacher, I loved, I used to have this thing called Afternoon Art History Series every week. And we would be wherever we were in our curriculum at the time and kind of take a look at the art of the time and just see like how it reflected things or what people were thinking about. And I happened upon this one that just really struck me, and I found myself staring at it. It's called A Wild Scene by Thomas Cole. It's from around 1831, 1832. And I think desiring to be outside and in America, I had this great cross country trip once that made me just really love the geography of the United States. If you go to all the coasts, but you see, I'm just staring at this now because there's so much to look at. When I would do art history series with the students, I would always ask them, before having any kind of details about it, just what do you see? Where does your eye go?
I go right to that waterfall, sort of right in the center.
It kind of focuses your eye, really. That bright waterfall, absolutely. But then there's only one figure. No, there's a couple of figures. Sorry, I'm outside because, as you said, Gary, it's hard to get outside right now. So I have a bit of a glare on my screen.
I'm envying you.
But the use of the human figures is really interesting too, because they're very, very natural, right? So they're integrated with the land. They look to be Native American peoples. Doing what the Native American peoples would do when they were very connected to the land.
Right. And it's an interesting that the way it's painted is amazing because the longer you look, it's almost like an illusion that people start popping out the way they would if you were looking at nature. I'm already seeing 5 or 6 figures, actually, the longer that you look in there. Among them also some animals and some others. But you're right, that idea of also our image of Native Americans at the time is sort of captured in terms of, there's a certain, as you said, connection that was thought at the time, but then again, people question now, whether or not that's an interpretation of that. But you're right, the waterfall is an interesting part, right? Because just in terms of how paintings happen, when there's great contrast, it makes your eye go there. So it tends to be the waterfall, then tends to be the horizon. Then you see the figure that's by the tree over on the right, because that's the biggest contrast. And then as you go along, things start popping out. In the same way your eyes sort of acclimate to the outside world when you're out there. This is part of what's called the Hudson River School. You probably know that. So
what is the history? What is the history of this painting? What was the author? What was the artist's name again?
The artist's name was Thomas Cole, and it was part of a movement of naturalism. It's coming out of romanticism a little bit. It's a time when this idea, as you said, that nature, you know, is it chaos or is it actually better for you? This is a time when people are saying, like, for health reasons, you should physically be outside, because as humans, you know, this is a big time period of industrialization and things like that. And to say, like, we're losing something by not just connecting to nature and the outside world, that state of nature. I found a great quote by two art historians, Elizabeth Kornhauser and Tim Baring, and they basically described it this way. And if you take a look at the painting, you see what they're saying. They said, this painting is a fine essay in the sublime. The rough, uncultivated landscape and dark, rolling clearing convincingly represents untamed wilderness. And it just makes me think, boy, I would love to take a road trip across America right now. First of all, the roads are empty. But
it's true.
You know, but the land, there's something about the land that just continues on there. So it's nice to just get sucked in and out through this painting.
Yeah. And
which I think is a good example of romanticism there, right? Like, because of course we mean romanticism is in sort of idealizing and projecting this idealized version onto something, not just, you know, romantic in the traditional love sense, which I think really is evoked in this image.
And so I live in Washington, D.C., and I've actually noticed I've seen a lot more young people out and about than I usually do. Out riding bikes and going for runs and playing in their yards, or just sitting outside reading to get that sunshine and to you know, feel that sense of joy from sitting in nature. But there are lots of different ways that people are doing this across the country right now. And I think one of the things that we're seeing that may be kind of confusing or scary is just this incredible variety of responses. Mm-hmm. So I know Kirk has been thinking about like how varied all of these responses that we've seen are. And there's this interesting thing that's happening through the internet right now, which is that you know what's happening in your community through your parents and through your communities, but you also know what's happening in lots of other communities. And sometimes that can be very freeing because you can get really good ideas, but sometimes that can be kind of concerning because you are wondering why other people are making choices that your communities aren't. So Kirk, you said you had this really great resource to help people kind of see the different responses to the crisis right now.
Yeah, so I'll pull it up here. So this has to do with, you know, a principle that we talk about as federalism, meaning that we live in, it's often referred to the federal government, but the federal government is made up of 50 states. And federalism is referring to that relationship between the state, and then your local governments. And what I found really interesting about this map is you can look at each one of these states. So Indiana here, where I'm originally from, and you can see exactly how many confirmed cases they have, and then what actions that particular state has taken to respond to it. And this is interesting for me in a couple ways, because the intent that the founders had in designing our system the way they did was to ensure as much local control as possible, meaning what is the best choice is often determined by the person who's closest to whatever's going on. And so here you can see in Indiana, there's 657 confirmed cases, and they've taken all these steps to try to limit the further spread of the pandemic. If we go to South Dakota, that only has 46, they're taking a little bit of different tact and doing a little bit of different things. And so I just thought this is a really cool snapshot of sort of what is often sort of this very vague principle in action, because you can see based off similar comparisons what it is each of these states are doing. So I would certainly check it out. It's by a group called AEI, which is the American Enterprise Institute. They're a think tank out here in Washington, D.C. And I believe that they're updating this dynamically too. You can also look and see how different states or different cities across the country have seen an increase in cases. And then a few other areas where you can actually go and look at the local guidelines of each one of these areas too. So anyway, kind of a cool government principle in action.
Right. It's nice.
Absolutely.
It's a good way to visualize data too, right? Because like you said, there's your mind travels from your town to your state to the nation itself. And sometimes all that information can get really crazy. And you're right. It's interesting to think, ultimately that these are different states are making decisions that are reasonable for themselves. And rather than one across the board, news, it's like, what is the United States going to do? Well, it turns out the United States is filled with lots of different people, in lots of different places and situations. And so it's really nice to be able to visualize how the different states are dealing with it.
And there's certainly challenges that come with that approach too. And if you're interested in debating this topic, right now, BRI's Think the Vote topic is dealing with just this, right? Where would it be better if we had a single national approach to trying to deal with this pandemic, or are there benefits that come from grappling with this issue on a state by state basis?
Right. Particularly having to do with school closures, right? Because that's something that's
right.
Is really, really important right now.
Yeah.
Especially for all of you young people in the internet. So there are all of these responses, and one of my personal heroes, Mr. Rogers, he has this beautiful quote about looking for the helpers. But through my work with adolescents, my kind of exhortation to all of you on the internet is not look for the helpers, but how can you be a helper? There are lots of different experiments happening right now, lots of different communities, whether it's through the internet or through, mostly through the internet because of social isolation. But there are lots of ways. There are groups that you can sign up to volunteer to bring the elderly food to their homes since they're higher risk. There are a lot of groups who are setting up call chains so that you can call the elderly and those who are very isolated to provide resources for them, maybe just to chat. The equivalent of what used to happen where people used to go check on neighbors. I don't know if you do this in your town, but we used to go check on our neighbors during a big snowstorm. If we can't physically go check on the neighbors, we can still give them a call or reach out over the internet. There are millions of experiments happening right now in what's called mutual aid. So in the history of the United States, we have this culture of mutual aid, which is that when something bad happens, Americans almost universally organize independently to meet the needs of their local communities. And they do that because they feel it's their duty. And I'm wondering if you feel that duty, and if you do feel that duty, how you can go out and help your neighbors and help your community and help your town. There are lots of great stories of people doing this and ways doing this. Gary, Kirk, do you have any favorite stories you've heard of people helping each other out during this crisis?
I know just a lot of teachers who are friends who are sort of formed a nice network for each other and for the parents they know to help parents with, a lot of parents right now are sort of becoming teachers themselves at home for a little while. And so they are just opening up their books and their skills, and they're having visual meetings, kind of doing quick coaching for teaching. And I'm finding they're all filling their days in ways that are saying, I know a little bit about science, if you know a little bit about math, and they're all just having a free exchange of things just outside of the school that I think is really nice and totally voluntary.
I actually saw some high school students doing that who were offering to tutor younger students through Zoom. So that might be something. I don't know if the Babysitters Club was a book when you guys were all young, but it was when I was young. And that idea of forming a group that can really support your community with skills you have, like maybe offering tutoring for younger people in your community over Zoom, would be a way that you could be a helper. Kirk, did you have any kind of stories that have stuck out to you?
One happened right outside my window the other day. There's next door to me is a high-rise apartment complex, and there's a more at-risk person in that apartment complex whose birthday it was. And so there was a group of people who got together. It was like 9 o'clock in the morning, and they didn't want to directly interact because of self-isolation or social distancing, rather. And so they stood outside with noisemakers and a big banner that said "Happy Birthday" until this person came to the window, and then they sang "Happy Birthday" and then left the gifts at the front door, which I think is a really amazing way of showing community, because I think at our heart, human beings are social creatures, right? We build communities because there is something that we get from that interaction, and that was just a great example of seeing that in real time. But just to echo Gary's comments, I mean, I know that a lot of school districts now too are even offering helping to get school meals out to children in the district who would otherwise have lunches, which I think has been a really powerful thing. And seeing everybody come together at a difficult time, I think is always a really special thing to see. It's unfortunate that we go through these events, but it's heartening to know that we all are here for one another.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so on that note, I want to thank you for all your time. I want to encourage you to be the helpers in your communities, and let us know what you want to see in this kind of conversations in the future. So we're hoping to be with you through this and into the future as you figure out what it means to be a citizen in 2020 here in the United States. So thank you for your time. Thank you to my colleagues, Gary, Kirk.
It's been nice to connect.
It has, and we'll see you next time.
See you soon.
See ya.